recognized. I am the sister of Margaret and Catherine. Catherine is here today, and I'm the aunt of Nicholas and Henry. My sisters and I grew up on Lowell Avenue, and we are proud products of the Summit Public Schools. I went on to earn a degree in news editorial from Kent State University in Ohio. And for more than 20 years, I was a reporter and editor at the Summit Herald-Dispatch and the Independent Press in New Providence, which are both now shuttered. It was in the 1990s, while covering the placement of the time capsule at Summit City Hall, when I was first approached by a man named Jim Dunn about volunteering at the Historical Society, and here I still am today. It's a wonderful organization. The mission is to preserve and promote Summit history. Our headquarters is the oldest remaining building in town, the 1741 Carter House at 90 Butler Parkway, and we would love for you to visit. The house is open Tuesday mornings and Wednesday afternoons, September through June. And we also open by appointment. Admission is free, and our archives are, quite frankly, amazing. It is from those archives that we have picked the slides for today's talk, a somewhat random A to Z look at some of the people, places, and events that have shaped Summit's history. We have thousands more slides in our files, and as funds allow, it is our goal to digitize them. So if you enjoyed today's event, you can look forward to more A to Z talks and other slide lectures in the future. So as not to distract you with the light from the podium, I'm going to stand in the back. Let's begin, of course, with the letter A. This is a view taken in the late 60s or early 1970s. For as long as there has been a township and then a city of Summit, there has been a vibrant downtown with businesses, retail stores, and a train station that is active nearly every hour of the day and night. This view highlights the central retail business district in all its autumnal glory. Franklin Place is at the bottom right, with the train station cobblestone lot at the lower left. As of a few years ago, the entire downtown is included on the National Register of Historic Places. For B, we will remain downtown. That seems pretty focused to everybody. We'll remain downtown with the letter B on Beechwood Road. This slide from about 50 years ago looks north from the train station, and if you squint your eyes just slightly to block out the cars, this portion of Beechwood doesn't look dramatically different now. See the name Muir's on the building in the upper right? That's the corner of Springfield Avenue and was a branch of the larger Muir's department store in East Orange, which was open for 93 years until it went bankrupt in the early 1970s. That corner in Summit was later a store called Cards Galore. Most recently, it was Regal Bank, and it is now undergoing renovations to become the new home of Summit's branch of Bank of America. C takes us just a little north to the Summit Casino, which stood at 67 Woodland. Modeled after the famed Newport Casino in Rhode Island, its purpose wasn't gambling, but as a members-only gathering spot. Founded in 1887 with William DeForest as its president, the club was opposite McGregor Road, which was then called School Lane. Annual dues were $25, and the two-story frame building featured a theater that seated 500, bowling alleys, a billiards room, a cafe, a library, and a smoking room. There was also a swimming pool, and there were tennis courts, croquet grounds, a rifle range, and an archery setup. On Labor Day 1900, the city firemen's parade included a drills demonstration. A 10 by 12-foot structure was set ablaze near the reviewing stand for the firemen to extinguish, and afterwards, 415 places were set for a banquet at the casino that ended with ice cream for dessert. The casino never succeeded financially, and it closed after only a few years. Houses were constructed on the property, and it is noted in the Carter House archives that the building was moved in 1905 to Springfield Township, though no details were provided. Staying with the letter C, let's take a look at Summit's Carnegie Library. It opened in 1911 on the same site where we are today and was funded in part with a $21,000 donation from Andrew Carnegie and was designed by local architect Earl Harvey Lyle, who also drew the plans for his father William's house on Prospect Street. Though Summit's Carnegie Library was raised in the 1960s, many still exist across the U.S., including in Belmar and in Elizabeth. Holmes A. Cliver taught drafting, boxing, and manual training, which was wood and metalworking, at Summit High School from 1919 to 1959. The son of George G. and Caroline Cliver of South Amboy, Mr. Cliver resided at 144 Ashland Road and lived in Summit for 55 years. He was married to lifelong Summit resident Ruth Kane, graduated from Columbia Teachers College, and belonged to Christ Church, the New Jersey Education Association, and Canoe Brook Country Club. At one time, what we now consider East Summit was known as Deantown because so many members of the Dean family resided there. John Dean, a soldier in the Revolutionary War under George Washington, is believed to have been one of the first permanent settlers in this area after he and members of the Sayre family purchased land directly from the Indians. In 1859, a local directory listed Benjamin and Sylvester Dean as being employed as turners, meaning they made either parts for wheels or components for furniture making, such as table legs and chair spindles. Their business was at 111 and 113 Morris Avenue, just north of Mountain. The area eventually ceased to be called Deantown when fewer boys were born into the family. But at one time, there was a Deantown public school, and Summit Fire Department Hose Company number 2 at 83 Park Avenue marked its equipment Deantown. For reasons lost to history, while the DeForests and the Sayers and the Risks had Summit streets named in their honor, the Deans did not. The Summit Elks, whose initial Maple Street Lodge is seen here, were chartered in 1911, and in the ensuing years, members have raised and distributed more than $14 million in charitable donations. Still headquartered at 40 Maple Street, Summit is New Jersey's fastest growing Elks Lodge, with more than 2,000 men and women as members. Recent projects have included providing bulletproof vests to local police officers, providing children with physical and developmental challenges time at camps designed for them, hosting a community flag day, and sponsoring multiple outreach efforts for veterans. Native Philadelphian George Manley built a home facing today's Locust Drive that after his death became Fair Oaks Sanatorium, founded by 2 doctors who had been colleagues at Greystone, a state hospital in Morris Plains. In 1904, this structure that faced Prospect Street replaced the former Manley home as the main building, and its construction marked the beginning of the present Summit Oaks campus, where the last old building was demolished and replaced just a few years ago. Over the years, patients at the Behavioral Health Hospital have included household names from Hollywood and the political world. We had a glimpse of Summit's Carnegie Library, but before its construction, book borrowers visited this, the town's first library facility, where Tulip Street meets Springfield Avenue. When the books were moved to Maple Street, this site became the Summit Playhouse, founded in 1918 as a war relief organization. It is one of the country's oldest continuously operating community theaters. In 1918, the Playhouse Association began paying annual rent of $1 to the Library Association, and in 1968, the library officially deeded the building to the Playhouse. In 1960, a 120-seat auditorium had been added, and the original 1891 building became the stage. We're all familiar with the Grand Summit Hotel, but here's a view you may never have noticed. In 1929, at the site of the former Blackburn House, J. William Hatt, spelled with 2 T's, constructed the Hotel Suburban. One worker seems to have been determined to ensure Mr. Hatt's name in perpetuity, and arranged bricks to spell Hat Hotel over the windows of the left of the entrance, though over the years, one of the T's has disappeared. Look closely up there and you'll also see symbols including an anchor shaped in protruding bricks. In 1904, the railroad tracks through downtown had been lowered below street level, and members of the Humane Commission of the Town Improvement Association decided a fountain or watering trough should be used to replace one pulled out during construction. Money was raised and local architect Benjamin Vroom White did the design. In 1907, the granite trough was installed, including ornamental spouting metal dolphins. By 1936, only 2 horses remained in Summit and the city cut off water to the trough. It sat inactive on Union Place about a block away from where it is today at the eastern end until 1958, when it was dismantled and stashed at the Public Works garage on Chatham Road. Fast forward to 2001, when an effort spearheaded by the Summit Historical Society saw the trough refurbished and reinstalled, including replication of the missing dolphins. It was done in memory of the Society's former curator, Mary Catherine Fitzpatrick. The project was overseen by restoration architect Ralph Walter of Summit. The exact location of this incinerator may remain a mystery, but we know it was a volunteer women's organization, the previously mentioned Town Improvement Association, that lobbied successfully for not only Summit's first municipal garbage collection, but also for town-wide mosquito control and the creation of public playgrounds here. The 1929 annual city report included a category called Garbage, Ashes, and Refuse Collection. There was a superintendent in charge of this work, and he was reporting to City Hall twice a day to receive complaints as part of his duties. Garbage and refuse were collected from homes 3 times each week, with all materials collected put in the same wagon and hauled to this incinerator plant for burning. That year, city staff included 8 ashmen, 7 with a horse and wagon, and 1 man with 2 horses who pulled a wagon in the downtown area. Refuse was defined as mostly dry material such as glass, paper, cloth, and wood. Ashes, the report continued, were disposed of in low places throughout the city and where individual citizens desired fills be made on their properties. On Ashwood Avenue, Jefferson School was officially opened on November 4th, 1931, and the occasion included an evening musical presentation and remarks from school superintendent John B. Dougal, who had shared an outline of the growth of the Summit school system. Also at the event, School Board President John D. Morgan presented the Jefferson community with a Bible, and it was noted in newspaper accounts it has been his custom to make this donation at the opening of each school. The Hill City's first public school was actually also within the current Jefferson district, where today's Morris Avenue meets Glenside. Shirley White Keeney died in 2010 at age 92. Her dedication to her hometown and her institutional knowledge of Summit history remain unsurpassed. The Summit High School graduate, who's wearing the green dress, was a member of the class of 1935 at Oberlin College. Having begun her community service while a preschooler in Summit, delivering food to the needy and ill with her mother and aunt as part of efforts by the Fortnightly Club, she was later active with organizations that included the Overlook Auxiliary, the Rees Reed Arboretum, the Summit Convalescent Committee, the local Red Cross, the Summit Speech School, and the Junior League, where she worked at the thrift shop for more than 50 years, and where there is now a scholarship given every year in her memory. At the Summit Historical Society, Shirley was a faithful Tuesday morning volunteer for decades. I am honored to have considered her a dear friend and to have been asked to write and deliver her eulogy. Here, Shirley, second from left, was attending the June 20th, 1976 unveiling of a large diorama created for the American Bicentennial that depicts a scene of Revolutionary War-era life along today's Morris-Essex Turnpike, including a couple of George Washington signal beacons. With Shirley were, from left, Kathleen Sayre, Fran and John Sayre, and the Historical Society's Howard Welsh. A peek of the diorama is at far right. For a long time, its home was in the lobby of the 1960s Summit Library, and today we are pleased to have it on permanent display at the Carter House. The office building at 25 DeForest replaced the Beechwood Hotel, Summit's last grand summer resort, demolished in 1953. The current building dates to 1958, constructed as the East Coast headquarters of Kemper, known at that time as Lumberman's Insurance. Construction had taken 2 years. At the grand opening, Hathaway G. Kemper noted his firm had followed a painstaking survey of proposed sites from New Haven, Connecticut to Philadelphia. New Jersey's governor at the time, Robert Maynor, attended the event. In 1958, the 5 companies under Kemper and Lumberman's management had total assets of $288 million with more than 1.5 million policyholders served by 8,000 agents. Clients included Corning Glass, Haverford College, the H.J. Heinz Company, and Westinghouse Electric, in addition to hundreds of thousands of auto and homeowner policies. For L, we have locomotive. From 1837 until they were lowered in 1904, train tracks had run through downtown at street level, with the Summit Avenue Bridge, seen here, passing over them. A new depot, still in use, opened in 1905. Just after 1900, the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western's ad department created the character of Phoebe Snow, who wore a white dress accented with a pin-on corsage of violets. Miss Snow was able to travel by train clad in all white because of the railroad's use of anthracite rather than soft coal, resulting in a cinder-free journey. At the peak of her popularity, Phoebe Snow disappeared during World War I when the government took over the railroads and ordered the soft coal again be used. In 1914, the Lyric Theater was built at 23 Beechwood Road. It was the site not only of moving showings, but also of various benefits. One example is one held in 1917 for Ambulance Company 33, whose send-off from town featured a band, the fire department, and a large and loud crowd of citizens. In May 1951, after a fire began in the Lyric's ladies' room, which was believed to have been smoldering for hours before firefighters were called to the scene at 5:40 a.m. The building was torn down the following month, and the property now houses the Bank Street parking lot and a sitting area known as Lyric Park. It took me a moment. I think this was almost taken from Summit Avenue, and I think the darker building at your left, I think, is now Boxwood Coffee, and I think the white building about in the middle of the screen is now where Zappia's is. To the right is the Bassett Building, and in the back, the big building is a freight building and storage building that stood on Railroad Avenue. In the late 1870s, plans for New England Avenue were laid out by Summit resident George W. Allen, who worked in the wallpaper manufacturing industry in New York after serving with the 15th Connecticut Regiment during the Civil War. The street opened in 1879 with 20 or so elaborate Victorian mansions, many designed by Short Hills architect Arthur B. Jennings. Rising property taxes and high heating bills saw nearly all of the homes replaced by apartments a few decades later. New England Gardens went up in 1940, followed in the 1950s by complexes called Troy Court, New England Village, and Berkshire Gardens. Overlook Hospital founder William Hillary Lawrence Jr., born in 1878, was known as the boy doctor because his father was also a physician. William Jr. graduated from Summit High School at 15 and at 20 completed studies at the College of Physicians and Surgeons at Columbia University. In 1905, Dr. Lawrence borrowed $15,000 to construct Overlook, which opened its doors on October 1st, 1906, with 16 private rooms and 2 wards. In 1914, Overlook was purchased for $125,000 by public subscription and it became a community hospital. 5 years later, Dr. Lawrence and Dr. Maynard Bensley introduced the concept of team medicine to New Jersey, and 11 years later, the men established a group practice with 6 colleagues that became the Summit Medical Group, hence the pavilions on the Berkeley Heights campus being named Lawrence and Bensley. A large portion of Summit's population has long been Presbyterian and belonged to Central Presbyterian Church, including Emmeline Bunnell. A daughter of Jonathan Crane Bunnell and Phoebe Ward, she was born on River Road in Chatham Township, and she grew up in Summit at 272 Morris Avenue. In 1939, it was she who donated to Central Presbyterian its Christmas windows in memory of her sisters. Commander Edwin J. and Margaret Quinby were longtime residents at 30 Blackburn Road, the former coach house for 77 Prospect Street. The commander served in the Navy in both World Wars, and he and his wife were accomplished musicians. Their carriage room became home to the console of a theater organ, a harp, a harpsichord, a Steinway piano, and a concert grand, but was still large enough they could accommodate 70 guests. Commander Quinby's passion, though, was the rescue of the Delta Queen, a stern-wheel steamboat, and its relocation from California to the Mississippi River, where it re-entered cruise service. Using his engineering skills and love of music, he reconstructed an old steam calliope so the keyboard could sit on one deck and the hot steam pipes on another. Calliopes, the commander explained, were essential as they announced the impending arrival of a vessel from as far as 5 miles away. In December 1902, bids went out for a new elementary school to be constructed on Park Avenue at a cost of approximately $35,000. Its 8 rooms welcomed students on February 6, 1905, and additions were made in 1916, 1926, 1928, and 1968. Pupils took a vote in 1920 to name the school for President Theodore Roosevelt, who had died the year prior. His sister, Corinne Roosevelt Robinson, came to town to give a speech during the naming ceremony. The school still stands, sold and converted to condominiums due to decreased school enrollment. Yes, Summit at one time had 2 separate movie theaters. In the 1930s, for 10 cents on a Saturday afternoon, you could enjoy a double feature at the Strand Theater on Springfield Avenue, just west of Woodland. During those same years, local children also reported they often saw world heavyweight championship boxer Primo Carnera in the seats. He would come to Summit to watch movies to help himself learn English. He was among the fighters who trained at Madam Bay's camp on River Road in Chatham Township. The Strand Theater was mostly demolished in 1988, replaced with a mini mall in 1989. The stage and surrounding walls were preserved and incorporated into a restaurant at the back of the property. Before the high school was constructed on Kemp Place Boulevard in 1962, the current 1923 middle school housed students in grades 7 to 12. Between 1950 and 1960, Summit's population had grown from 17,929 to 23,598, and the number of students increased from about 2,500 to more than 4,000. The new high school building was estimated to cost $3.2 million, but the final tab was $2.865 million, due to what press accounts at the time described as city and school officials working diligently, although at times in moderate conflict. Youngstown, Ohio native and Wellesley graduate Tilla Thomas taught at Summit High School from the early 1920s until her late 1950s retirement as head of the Modern Languages Department. She lived in town until she relocated to Pennsylvania in the 1980s. Contributions at the time of her death were requested to the Summit College Club, of which she was a member, and that group still bestows an annual scholarship in her honor. For as nearly as long as there has been a town here, there has been a Union Place, even back in the era when Beechwood Road was known as Keithawk Place. When summer visitors began arriving in the 1800s, their trains from New York and Newark pulled in at street level, and Union Place was their first sight. There was a Summit Hotel across the street. Mr. Littell had his store nearby, and there was also a freight house. This view, while vintage, is way more recent, but the buildings pictured still give a sense of what was. And this was the oldest picture we could locate of Union Place. Adjacent to Littell's store at the western end of Union Place was a platform that served both freight and passengers. Bill, as he was known, Mr. Littell owned what was considered what was Summit's primary grocery, dry goods, and general store. It also housed Summit's first post office and telegraph station. In about 1871, Mr. Littell's platform depot was replaced by a small rail station about where the current one is. The electrification of Lackawanna service through Summit was authorized in 1928, and its installation involved the first usage of 3,000-volt direct current in suburban American rail service. And at the Carter House, this is the building that we get statistically among the most queries about in any given year. Across from today's municipal golf course at the end of River Road, where today there is a highway interchange where city limits meet Milburn and Chatham, in 1874, George Vanderpool replaced his family's colonial farmhouse with a 14-room castle-like home that was then lost to an 1882 fire. By 1885, it was replaced with what came to be known as Vanderpool Castle. Son Ambrose was the only Vanderpool child to survive infancy. He became a lawyer and then retired after a year in practice to become an author. His work included an expansive history of Chatham. Ambrose never married, and when he died in 1940 at age 65, most of his $3.1 million estate was bequeathed to the Masonic Home and Charity Foundation in Burlington. The castle was sold to Victor Zahatikin, who lived there with his family until it was purchased and demolished in 1969 by the New Jersey Highway Department. And when you visit the Carter House, you can see both the servant annunciator call system from Vanderpool Castle and one of the carriage lights that stood out on the property because the Vanderpools had 24/7 guards who walked the property and lighted and then extinguished the lights at the proper time of day. From 1905 until 1913, when the original $27,000 Washington School, now the portion that faces Morris Avenue, opened, children in North Summit attended classes in a rented home that no longer exists at 553 Morris. Owner William F. Edwards was paid a monthly rent of $40. Originally called Public School Number 3, Washington, which happens to be my alma mater, then had 4 classrooms, while kindergarten was taught in the neighborhood house next door, which is now the Summit Antique Center. Additions were made to Washington School in 1923, 1929, and 1965, and the Board of Recreation opened nearby Tatlock Field in October 1960. I could not find anything that started with X, so we're going with X as in EX. In the archives of the Carter House, along with so many photos of existing homes, we also have documentation of X houses like this one, which stood on the northeast corner of Summit and Springfield Avenues from 1850 until 1949. That is where the Committed Pig restaurant is now. It was built for John Daggett Hunt, but in 1895, the owner was John Burling, who had opened his practice in Milburn's Wyoming section and visited patients in that township and in Summit on horseback. Dr. Burling, who died in 1937, had maintained his practice at 333 Springfield Avenue until 1935. It then became the Charm House Tea Room, then headquarters of the local chapter of the Red Cross. Before the current YMCA opened in 1912 at Maple and Broad Streets, the organization had begun in a small rented house on Park Avenue, today's Broad Street, and when it outgrew that, the Y bought a lot on Railroad Avenue. Eventually, the Y constructed a building at Maple and Springfield where the Summit House restaurant is on the corner, with a gym in back, a pool beneath the building, 2 bowling alleys, and this billiards room. Membership grew from 100 to 370, so in 1909, a drive was launched that raised funds to construct the building the YMCA occupies on Maple Street today. Meanwhile, a 1910 letter to the editor of the Summit Herald issued a challenge. It seems strange, the letter from someone who signed with the initials MM read, that while the boys of Summit have their YMCA, their football, their baseball, and their basketball clubs, their brigades, and their church organizations, the girls were going without those blessings. Why, the letter's author continued, has the boy been made so much of, while the girl has been allowed, like Cinderella, to sit in the corner among the ashes? It seems that with a portion of the same kindness, which for years has been extended to our YMCA, we might also have a YWCA. 8 years later, a YW was organized in the former Presbyterian Chapel on Maple Street, and in the 1920s, the YW, now the Connection, was given Jonathan Bonnell's former house on Morris by his daughter Jenny. It was destroyed by fire in 1946, and the present building, opened its doors in 1949. Finally, we have reached the letter Z, and we all know Summit's zip code, 07901. Yes, that was a stretch. I couldn't find a Z either. What you may not be aware of is that the town's first post office was at 401 Springfield Avenue, which is today the Roots Building. This post office on Maple Street, the current one, was constructed with Depression-era Works Progress Administration funds from the federal government on land that had been a mini golf course. In 1950, the Postmaster General, then a cabinet position in the federal government, announced mail delivery nationally would change from twice daily to once. An editorial in the Summit Herald described the decision as an old bureaucratic trick to cut governmental services in the very way that will affect the public most directly. In 1962, a major expansion of Summit's post office was proposed that would have seen it become a regionalized facility serving 30 communities. Postal officials termed it a plan to create a mail distribution center, but city officials described it as a huge industrial trucking operation, and the plan was dropped in 1963. Thank you so much for your attention, interest, and patience as you have allowed me today to share my love of Summit history. In closing, I would like to quote a passage from author E. Robin Little's 1949 City History volume. Location, Mr. Little wrote, does not make full-flown a good community. Good citizens make good communities. As to why Summit has so many good citizens, the answer is that, since its formative years, it has to attract good citizens. It began as a community of homes and as a place favorable to home life. It therefore had a good start toward decency, shared responsibilities, and good government. Like attracted like, and good citizenship became firmly rooted into the hard black rock of these hills. Thank you very much. I am happy to take questions if anyone has questions, and if we don't have the answers, we are happy to look them up for you. I'd like to give a special thanks to Lori Dahl, who's been running around moving microphones and turning lights on and off. Lori is on our board and comes to these events for me. I call her my lady in waiting because she does whatever I ask, and it's very helpful. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
What is the Vanderpools, like, why were they so wealthy? What industry was all their money from?
I believe the father had been an attorney too. It's very interesting though, they were, nobody else in Summit had round the clock guards walking their properties. Something had happened in their history to make them very security conscious. The man who gave us the servant call box remembers spending a ton of time in the castle because there was a Zahotican son his age. And he said the bedrooms each had one of those little grates on it with a sliding door. So if someone knocked on your door, you didn't open it until you looked out and saw who it was. So unfortunately, something terrible must have happened in that family to make them so security conscious. But by placing the lanterns throughout the property, they assured that the guards were walking the property because you could tell if the lanterns had been extinguished or lit. Yes.
Just a tidbit of information, where the municipal golf course is now is actually part of the old Vanderpool estate.
Oh, and where the house was sort of where that office building is in that triangle now, I take it. It was Chubb. Now I think it might be Wells Fargo. It's very hard to tell from photos just where it was.
Castle was on the corner of River Road and what used to be the original Route 24.
Okay.
That ran up to John and Madison on Marsden. Directly across from that on River Road, like I said, where the municipal golf course is now, that was part of the Vanderpool estate.
Okay.
In fact, the pond itself was Vanderpool Pond.
Yes.
Originally did not have that island in the middle of it. That was added.
Oh,
Used to be
all water.
ponds.
Oh, okay.
Then annually they have fishing competition.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And if you're driving towards the mall.
Mm-hmm.
The castle under Route 24, and between the eastbound and westbound lanes, if you're looking east, you can see one of the walls of the original castle.
Oh, I've never
I
noticed
mean,
that.
Perimeter walls, not the wall of the house.
Right. So you go through the light that's there now, the office building is up on your right, past that?
Yeah, going right between the two, the eastbound and the westbound lanes, there's a wall, part of the wall that remains.
Oh, I've never noticed that. So we're all gonna be slowing down the next time we head to JFK Parkway. Anyone else? Yes.
You said the Roots building was the YMCA?
No,
Or
Summit
it's
House.
Oh.
Roots
oh,
was the post office.
Oh, okay, so are they the same buildings?
No,
No, I
Maple
mean,
Street
from
bisects
original,
them.
Like.
Yes.
Yes, that's,
Yes, they are the original buildings.
and Roots, when did, the Roots department store come into being, do we know?
40s or 50s, maybe? And his name was Perry Root. That was why it was called Roots. It doesn't have anything to do with plants. 40s or 50s, and then maybe until the 80s?
Actually, when Summit House was being renovated, it
Oh,
put a
when,
hold on the
when Summit
construction
House
because of the
Restaurant
pool.
was working on that building, no one could understand, why aren't they opening? Why aren't they opening? Well, in construction, it turned out the swimming pool in the basement, which they were not aware of, I don't know if it still had swimming pool water in it. Maybe it had, rainwater in it or something. They ended up having to do a tremendous amount of more work than they thought because there was the remnants of a swimming pool still in the basement of that building.
Are there any pictures of it?
Not that I've ever seen. Yes.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, Roots was across the street from
Where it is now.
where it is now.
The question is, with everything that's happening in Summit and the history of Summit, does anyone know any plans for the old Bank of America building, which actually was designed, I believe, by the same man who designed the horse trough? Nothing that I know of. Jim? Oh, so it's
Somebody else.
a landlord owns it, so it'll potentially be rented to somebody else? Or, yeah.
I asked them, did they, and when I was at the bank, did they know what would be in that building after they left? And she laughed and said, probably a restaurant.
Yes. Any other questions? If not, thank you so much. And, oh, Kathy? No, no such thing as a stupid question.
Do you think that the membership of the Elks Club went up because Eli Manning joined?
Elks clubs are having a moment because the one in Maplewood, South Orange is going crazy too. Like no, it's just elks are a very hot thing right now.
Women can belong now too?
Yes, and the one in Summit also built a rooftop deck that probably attracted a lot of people for events and stuff.
But they have big elks up on the top. I don't know if you remember seeing it.
A membership
No.
of the Elks. I don't know it for a fact, but I am a member.
The
of it.
statue.
And when I attempted to join, I had to wait 6 months or so, and I've been in Summit for 28 years. So I couldn't understand why, I'm a pretty good citizen. And so I heard, and again, this is secondhand, that it's been a recent push to up the membership in the past year and a half or so. And that is because the National Elks Organization encouraged it. Why, I don't know. But it came as a push from the National Elks. And so.
Okay, anybody else? If not, thank you. And the library has invited us to come back and give as many talks and show as many slides as we like. So keep your eye on the library calendar for this coming fall. Thank you very much.
You see in there. Is that her? No,
That's her,
that's her.
probably. No. Anybody look from there?
Nope.
That's us.
That's too bad. We didn't know.
We didn't get the beginning. We came
Yeah,
in,
but but then I wonder if Jack knew about this at all. How
Well,
does
he
that-
probably did, because doesn't he give money to the historical?
I don't know.
I think he does.
Well, he gets the newsletter.
Yeah, well, then if he gets the newsletter, then it was in it.
In it. Because he knows a lot more than I know. I mean,
Yeah.
especially Vanderpool. We used to swim in that pool,
I
that
guess we
pond.
can get out of here.
Turn around.
Wait a minute, let me get out.
Okay, you get out. Here we go. Two invalids trying to get out of the hole.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah.
Maybe we didn't get the beginning of it.
That's
I don't know.
right.
So that